Hey guys, it's me, Seren, back with another video. So, if you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen that my Twitter has just been like in fucking shambles for a while, for the last few days. And a lot of people have been asking me if I was going to make a video about it. And initially, I wasn't going to make a video about it, but you know what? I decided that I'm going to make a video about it because I feel like, especially on Twitter, not just on Twitter, but I see it on Twitter the most, which was why I didn't even want to get Twitter. The only reason why I got Twitter was because you guys, my subs, like really, a lot of people really wanted me to get it because I had a lot of people that watched videos but didn't have YouTube accounts, so they couldn't leave comments, but they wanted to talk and interact and like talk about, like things that I talked about in the video and stuff like that. So that's the only reason why I even made a Twitter account. When I first made this channel, the only social media that I had was Tumblr. That was it. You guys wanted me to make Instagram, so I made an Instagram account. You guys wanted me to make Twitter, so I made a Twitter. You guys wanted me to make Snapchat, so I made a Snapchat. But I didn't have anything. And a huge part of why is because I feel like Twitter is a toxic fucking ass cesspool. Twitter really encourages groupthink. Like, something about Twitter just really encourages, like, groupthink and this hive mentality and this mob mentality. And you also have really big accounts that sick their followers on people, and they make it so that people are afraid to have a dissenting opinion on Twitter. And that's not to say that that doesn't happen on YouTube also, because I know more than anybody, well, not more than anybody, but on YouTube they do the same thing where they have people that have these like big huge accounts that like make videos about people, normally people with smaller accounts, and they like sick people on them. But I will say that on YouTube it's a little bit different because you have to listen. Generally, you have to actually watch the person's video and listen to them. And I've actually had people leave me comments like, oh, I came here from like such and such's video and I actually agree with what you have to say, stuff like that. Twitter is a little bit different because you can also retweet, like, you can do tweets out of context. You can retweet, one tweet out of a whole entire chain, and then you can kind of like write your own thread to like put your own spin on what somebody said. And there's a lot of like beating people over the head with your opinion on Twitter. Like, there's a lot of people that don't want to have discussions. They do not want to have conversations. They don't want to have a back and forth. They just want to beat you over the head with their opinion. And if you don't agree with them, then like, you're wrong and you're this and you're that and fuck you and blah, 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 blah. And I will also say that there's a lot of scary ass people on Twitter that will talk shit, but they won't at you. They, like I said, they don't want to have an actual conversation where you guys can get into a back and forth. They say little slick shit, and then when you reply, they block you. At least I will say something I love about YouTube. The bigots on YouTube motherfucking own their truth. They stand in their truth. They own it. They are not going to back down from that fucking truth, bitch. Like, they think you're a fucking nigger, and they're gonna make a whole motherfucking series of videos about how you a nigger. And then they're gonna have their fucking followers come to your page and leave the link so you know that they think that you're a fucking nigger. They're gonna own it. They're gonna own it. Twitter, there's a lot of like tweeting and subtweeting and hiding your hands and screen capping and I didn't say that and apologizing in DMs. Meanwhile, you stunt on the timeline. It's very, and there's like I will also say that there's like a younger crowd. I feel like there's a younger crowd on Twitter. Lots of teenagers, lots of people that don't know anything but like think they know everything. And again, they want to hop in your mentions and then act surprised when you clap back like, oh my God. And especially when you have a little bit more visibility, it's always like, oh, why are you adding me? So the backstory of what happened on Twitter, which is something I really want to like get into, not just like the Twitter, but like the actual conversation discussion, was that I saw people basically discussing identity privileges. And I've actually been thinking about it a lot since then, and I made up my own little term, sliding scale of identity privilege. We talk a lot on this channel about intersectionality and the way that identities intersect and the way that that impacts our different privileges. You guys hear me say all the time that I'm black first and then I'm a woman. My blackness impacts my womanhood. My womanhood really does not impact my blackness. When people look at me, they see a black woman, they see me as black first, and that blackness impacts, how much I'm going to get paid. It impacts, when I was able to vote, I'm not the same as a white woman because of my race. It impacts me. So we were talking about, kind of again, what I like to call the sliding scale of identity privileges and how you can have privilege. There's racial privilege. What basically my point was that on the sliding scale of identity privilege is weighted, right? So the big one is race. The big one is race. If you're white, you have the most amount of privilege, period. The next one is gender. If you are male, you have male privilege. So in our white supremacist patriarchal society, those are like the two big ones, the two biggies, race and then gender. Then after that, I would say the next one is sexuality. So you have race, you have gender, and then you have sexual orientation. So we joke around all the time about white privilege bingo, but really that's the way that it works. It operates on a sliding scale, and there's kind of a lot of moving pieces, you know? So you might have privilege because you're white, but then you kind of lose points because you're a woman. Or you might have privilege because you're white, you might have privilege because you're male, but you lose points because you're gay, because of your sexual orientation. Which is why I always say that a lot of times I find that white gay men like fucking Milo, fucking Nero, are some of the angriest people because they feel like something was taken away from them. Like, I was born white, I was born male in this country that operates on white supremacist patriarchy, but I am not getting my full fucking privilege benefits. I'm not getting my full, privilege checks in the mail because of my fucking sexual orientation, And then on the lower level, kind of tiers of privilege, you have able-bodied privilege, you have cis privilege, you have light-skin privilege, you have pretty privilege, thin privilege. As you get lower and lower down, you have these other things that also give you certain privileges in our society. But the big three, race, gender, sexual orientation. Oh, and I would also say, the fourth one is class. That is another privilege. So I would say, well, the big three are race, gender, sexual orientation, and then the next one is class, and then we kind of move on down. So the way that works is, again, all of these things, even though they make up one whole entire person, they kind of work independently of each other in determining how much privilege you have. It is a sliding scale of privilege. And I feel like that is generally the concept of intersectionality. So the original conversation that we were having on Twitter, somebody who I'm not going to put on blast because I don't do that, but someone on Twitter that I was talking to said that so this was a black gay male, said that their sexual orientation pretty much vanished. It offset their male privilege so that they did not have male privilege anymore. And this was part of a larger conversation about how queer black people, and especially queer black men, are kind of aligned with black women against straight black men, and how we're kind of how there's kind of this line in the sand, and you have black women and you have queer people, and especially queer black men on one side, and then you kind of have straight black men on the other side. I said that your male privilege does not vanish, especially because you are a cis person, you were born a man, you were born male, you were socialized as a male in our patriarchal society, which means you did grow up with certain ideas and beliefs even before you begin to actively explore your sexuality. And I'm not getting into the sexuality of children and things like that, but I'm just gonna say prepubescent, before puberty hit and you really started getting more into sexuality, because I'm just not getting into the sexuality of children. I'm just not doing it. But you were socialized as a man in our patriarchal society, and you do still have systemic male privilege, especially, and this is really important, because you read as male. So especially for people that read as male, short hair, bald heads, beards, they dress in kind of maybe a more heteronormative, style. You still have your male privilege. You cannot opt out of your male privilege. Your male privilege does not magically disappear because of your sexual orientation. It does not work like that. And you are also going to have systemic privileges over me as a woman. For example, if we both go for the same job, if you get hired for the job, you are going to get paid more as a man. That is a systemic male privilege in our society. And the way that the conversation ended up going was basically people telling me, a lot of queer people got in my mentions talking about how, well, you can't say that because you're separating my identity, and I am equal parts you know, gay and a man and black and this and that. And you can't say that, you know, you can't say that my male privilege trumps my race or something like that. And I was just like, but this is something that we talk about all the time. Like, even when we talk about feminism and we talk about how white women have privilege as white, but how they don't have privilege as women, we're not separating out their identity and saying they're more one or the other, but that's the way that identity politics work. Like, of course, all those identities make up one person, but you can't live out in motherfucking La La Land. There's a lot of people, and I say the same exact thing about white people. There's a lot of people that, like, live out in La La Land, like, outside of, they feel like they're living outside of society, or, you know, they feel like they're operating outside of society, and, like, that the way that society works, like, doesn't fucking affect them. Like, and I am one complete, you know, whole magical unicorn individual, and just because you're telling me that I was born and socialized, you know, in a society that gave me male privilege, well, being male is just as much a part of me as being gay and being black. So you can't tell me that I have male privilege because you're trying to separate out my identity. Like, a bunch of rhetoric, which I've talked about before, a bunch of language that kind of sounds nice but doesn't really mean anything. And I feel like that is another big part of Twitter. You have a lot of people that say things that sound nice, especially for people that are not used to digging deeper and thinking a little bit more critically. Things that sound nice, but when you really look at it twice or look under the surface, it's like, what you're saying doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, what you're saying doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, yes, all of these individual facets of you make up one person, but I'm not going to pretend that the way that privilege works in our society does not operate independently of one another. And I'm also not gonna pretend that you as a male do not have systemic privilege over me as a female, because you do. You have systemic privilege over me as a male. And gender privilege is not the same as sexual orientation privilege. So it's like, you as a man, you as a male, you as a cis man, especially if you're male presenting, if you read as male, you're going to get certain privileges over me as a woman. I don't think that's hard to understand. But apparently, you know, queer Twitter didn't like being told that they still have privileges. And it's funny because I think I've told this story on this channel before. I got into an argument like that years and years and years ago with a friend of mine, a black man, a straight black man, on Twitter. Ironically, this was like when I had Twitter, like, in college. I got in an argument with a straight black male friend about internships. Because my friend got an internship. He worked really, really hard at the internship. At the end of the internship, they offered him a job. I said, you taking that unpaid internship was a privilege. He was like, I'm not privileged. The same thing we hear white people say, right? Like, I'm not privileged. I was born poor. I was raised in this shitty environment. You know, I had to work very hard to get the internship, and I had to work really, really hard at the internship to get the job. Like, how are you saying that I'm privileged? You know, like, I'm black. I'm a black man. I'm a marginalized person. How are you saying that I have privilege? And I was like, well, just the very fact that you were able to take an internship and work for free because you were able to live at home and, you know, commute to your internship, you had a car which your parents bought you, you know, all these things make up, you know, little facets of privilege. That doesn't negate the fact that you're a marginalized person as a black man, but that also doesn't negate the fact that you have male privilege. You know, again, there's a lot of moving pieces, and people like to pretend that the pieces are stagnant. Like, well, I'm just 100% of me, one person, and I don't like what you're saying to me, so I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. So that was the original discussion about privilege and about the way that privilege works. Now, this person had all of motherfucking queer black Twitter in my mentions using gendered slurs. There were queer black men in my mentions calling me a bitch, look bitch, da 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 da, and it's like, this is a prime example of exactly what I'm talking about. You're flexing your male privilege on me. Even though you're queer, even though you're gay, even though you're whatever your sexual orientation is, you're flexing your male privilege by calling me a bitch, black bitch, bitter bitch, look, you fucking black bitch, da 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 da. You're flexing your male privilege on me because that's not something you have to worry about. You might have to worry about someone calling you a slur because of your sexual orientation, but you don't have to worry about someone calling you a gendered slur because you are a man. That is your male privilege. And when you use gendered slurs against me, your sexual orientation does not negate the fact that you're flexing your male privilege on me right now by calling me a bitch, a black bitch, you know, all this other stuff, right? So it was very, very funny because they jumped in my mentions and proved my goddamn point and proved my point about how you're still, you know, operating within, you know, these patriarchal norms by jumping right into gendered slurs, even though you're a gay man. You're still flexing your male privilege on me, you know? You're attempting to mansplain, you know, queer identity, and I'm bisexual also. Like, I have a black woman's queer identity as well. You're attempting to mansplain queer identity to me using gendered slurs, and then in the very next breath, you're going to tell me that you don't have male privilege because of your sexual orientation, because of your marginalized identity. And that was something that I also started thinking about. You have a lot of marginalized people and oppressed groups, and this is not just on Twitter, that once they get into these situations, especially on social media, like not just on Twitter, but like social media in general, they get into these situations with other people in that kind of same marginalized group, and they kind of like click up, you know, like, oh, like we're 20,000 queer brown people, so we're gonna just like attack other people. They adopt the same oppressive tactics that are used against them. And I say this all the time. You have a lot of people that don't want to actually dismantle oppressive systems. They just want to move up the ladder a little bit, you know, in their system. They just don't want to be at the bottom anymore. They just don't want to be at the bottom anymore. They don't see anything wrong. This is another big problem on fucking queer Twitter with especially queer black men misgendering black women. I see it all the time. I see all the time queer black men misgendering Wendy Williams, for example, calling her Wendell, misgendering her as a man, when historically the misgendering of black women, especially dark-skinned black women, as men is a subset of white supremacy. It's white supremacist rhetoric. It's white supremacist rhetoric. It's not funny. It's not a joke. It's white supremacists, especially the idea of darker skinned black women as masculine, as not feminine, as men. And when you misgender that, and when you misgender us in that way, you are practicing misogyny. You are flexing your male privilege. You are operating within the patriarchal structure of our society, and you being queer does not exempt you from that. And a lot of people feel like their marginalized status or their oppressed status somehow exempts them from oppressing others. Like, no, you're motherfucking oppressing others too. You're oppressing others also. In a way, a lot of this shit reminds me of white feminism. It's all real Taylor Swift-like. A lot of y'all fucking throw stones and then hide your hands, you know, like, oh, I'm marginalized, I'm the victim here, this is violence being enacted against me because I'm the marginalized victim. And your marginalized status does not exempt you from what you're fucking doing. And it's fucking gross. And it's mad gross. And it's mad fucking gross. So then, the next day, that conversation was still kind of going. Kind of in the middle of the conversation, the Korryn Gaines story broke about the young woman who was shot and killed in a standoff with police. Allegedly, she was mentally ill. Allegedly, she wasn't taking care of her son. Allegedly, the cops were trying to remove her son to put him in CPS. Allegedly, and she was shot and killed, and her 5-year-old son was also shot. Allegedly. And there was just like a lot of like stories were flying, and like a lot of like stuff was coming out, and like a lot of things were happening when the Korryn Gaines story kind of broke. So I'm going through the hashtag, the Korryn Gaines hashtag, to try to like get more information, and I see all these tweets about black men, cis-het black men, straight black men, and I'm like, what the fuck are these tweets doing here? And it's basically tweets that are talking about, like, the black men that are, because she allegedly, as a part of the standoff, pulled a shotgun on the police, and they're saying that that's why they had to shoot her and kill her. So I was seeing all these tweets about black men, and I'm not on your side, black men, and fuck you, black men, and black men are predators, and black men are pathological predators against black women. And like I said, I kind of felt like this was a carryover of the conversation that we were having before, because again, the whole premise for the gender identity, politics conversation was that queer black men should kind of align themselves with black women and with queer black women against straight black men, basically, because like black men are like our oppressors, So I kind of felt like, because that conversation had been going on for a couple days when the Korryn Gaines thing happened. So I kind of felt like that conversation kind of like spilled over into the Korryn Gaines hashtag. Because so apparently the same motherfucking coons and self-haters that come out every single time somebody gets killed, the same ones that came out when Sandra Bland got killed, the same ones that came out when Makita Boyd got killed, the same exact ones came out and started talking about, well, she pointed a gun at the cops. You can't say that. Again, basically parroting this white supremacist rhetoric of if you would just do what the cops ask you and behave, you wouldn't get hurt. Even though people were like retweeting links of like a fucking list of white people that pointed guns at the cops and fucking survived and things like that, like basically it's like, oh, just accept your place as second class fucking citizens in America and you won't get hurt. Like you won't get hurt, just accept it. Just accept your place. Stop trying to fight back. Stop trying to fucking, prove your worth. Stop trying to react the same way a white person will react. You're not white. Accept that you're a second-class citizen. That's it. So there was some of those people, I guess. It's funny because in the hashtag, I didn't even see any of those people. I saw mostly black women and queer black men talking about that. Like, oh, and see, like, black men are, like, I saw information. And that was coming from all different fucking races and genders. And there were a lot of black men that were retweeting information, injustice, things like that. And then I saw a lot of like people that were like, and black men don't even care. And they have no empathy. And they have no compassion. And this is why straight black women and queer black men and queer black people need to like align against straight black men. And I was just like, what are y'all even talking about? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, y'all are talking about how they're not tweeting about Korryn because they're tweeting all this, like, shit. But, like, you're not tweeting about Korryn either. You, like, tweeting about black men right now. Like, I'm just trying to get some fucking information about what's fucking going on. And I, like, can't get it because, like, the hashtag is, like, full of all this fucking nonsense. And then, and again, this also kind of spilled over from the conversation before, I started seeing basically white supremacist rhetoric met with white supremacist rhetoric. So you have these self-hating motherfucking coons, and I feel like there were self-hating coons of all genders, not just straight black men, but whatever. You have these self-hating coons that are like, oh, well, if she, had just listened and not pointed a gun at the cops, then, she would be alive and blah, 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 which is white supremacist rhetoric, fucking regurgitated, you're colonized, it's coming out of your mouth. And then I start seeing black women and queer black people and queer black men kind of like hitting that with more white supremacist rhetoric of like, well, you don't get to talk because you oppress black women, and statistics show that black men fucking assault and kill black women more than white people do. So you need to fucking keep your mouth shut on what should she have done, and, blah, 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 blah. And, 90% of black men that are sexually assaulted. 90% of like black women and like queer black people that are sexually assaulted are sexually assaulted by black men, and da 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 da. And I'm sitting back like, now weren't we just talking about black on black crime? Weren't we just talking about intraracial crime amongst black people? Weren't we just talking about how all crime is proportionate and related to race and proximity? All crime, not just murder, which is what we tend to talk about, but also that includes assault, sexual assault, kidnapping, domestic disputes. Like, weren't we just talking about that? Weren't we just talking about how it's racist white supremacist rhetoric when white people try to like use those type of numbers as some type of correlation to black on black crime, when all crime is proportionate to race and all race and neighborhood. And generally, if you're going to have a crime enacted against you, be that violence, be that sexual assault, be that murder, be that kidnapping, be that breaking and entering, it's going to be people that most likely live in your neighborhood and most likely people that live near you. Weren't we just talking about quantifying crime by race and how it's racist, white supremacist rhetoric that is used to pathologize black people And yet now I see black women and queer black men literally using this exact same language to pathologize straight black men? All I'm trying to do is go through this hashtag and get information about Korryn Gaines. And yet I see this white, it's like I said, it's like white supremacists. It's like black white supremacists meeting black white supremacists. Well, if those niggers would just listen and do what the cops said, they'd be alive. Well, nigger, you don't even get to talk because you fucking mostly commit the most fucking crimes against black women, despite the fact that all crime is related to race and neighborhood and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like going through the tag like, oh, this racism is killing me inside. Fucking Dave Chappelle. So then I tweeted, I said, can we not use white supremacist rhetoric when talking about the violence enacted against black women and queer black people of all genders by black men? Oh, queer Twitter and black woman Twitter motherfucking reacted, bitch. Oh, they did not like that one bit. I had queer Twitter and I had black queer Twitter and black women Twitter in my mentions for about 18 hours straight. And again, using more gendered slurs, using more ableist slurs. Somebody's like, oh, bitch, you're a fucking psycho. You're a fucking psycho stalker. Blah, 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 blah. But mind you, you're in my mentions using gendered slurs against me, using ableist slurs against me. You're in my mentions fucking attacking me. You're not trying to have a conversation. There were literally hundreds of people in my mentions. Out of all those hundreds of people in my mentions, only two, literally two users asked me, number one, what do you mean by that, Seren? And number two, what do you think would be more appropriate language to use? Only two people asked me, and I actually answered. So I'm going to read you guys what my reply was on what I think would be more appropriate language. You know, somebody said like, oh, what was the argument about? I said, let's not use white supremacist rhetoric when discussing violence enacted against queer black people and or black women by black men. I was like, folks reacted. Me, you can talk about violence enacted against black women by black men without invoking white supremacist rhetoric. Y'all, I don't understand the question. I had people, I'm looking for these tweets. I had people literally in my mentions for hours acting like they did not understand what I was saying. I had someone that was deliberately like really like missing the point. I kept saying over and over. They were like, well, but what about, you know, the people that don't use white supremacist rhetoric to talk about the violence and they're still shut down as bashing black men? I was like, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking specifically about people that use white supremacist rhetoric to pathologize black men using the exact same numbers and stats and figures that white people use, aka black on black crime, to pathologize black people. She was like, well, but what about I was like, I'm not talking about them. I'm not talking about them. I said the same thing about 15 times. I was like, I'm not talking about them. I'm specifically talking about white supremacist rhetoric and how it's inappropriate and how we shouldn't use it and how we shouldn't keep mimicking these, you know, I don't want to say vocal pattern speeches because that's not the right word. These dialogue patterns. We're mimicking these dialogue patterns of our oppressors, and we're mimicking it in the way that we fucking address one another. And I don't think it's cool. People's in my mentions like, Seren, you're a rape apologist. You're a fucking hotep bitch. You're this, you're that. I was like, why are you so attached to white supremacist language that even the mere question of can we not do it is causing you to react so strongly with all this anger? Really stop and think about that. Really think about that, because I didn't say anything except let's let go of white supremacist rhetoric. That was all I said. Here it is. So somebody asked me, so I'm going to read you guys the tweets. Y'all, all crime is proportionate to race and neighborhood, so it's racist to say black people are pathologically attacking other black people. Also, y'all, citing those same stats. Well, studies show black women are more likely to be attacked by black men, so black men must be pathological. Shrug. I was like, it's internalized anti-blackness being perpetuated against black men under the guise of activism, and honestly, I'm tired of it. It's ugly, and y'all are ugly. If you use the same studies cited by white supremacists arguing in favor of black on black crime to pathologize black men, it's an issue. I was like, and I was like, you might not like that it's an issue, but it's an issue. It's a regurgitation of white supremacist rhetoric, and we can talk about the effect of our patriarchal, white supremacist, misogynistic, pro-rape culture without it. I feel like that's a very not ridiculous thing to say. I feel like that's a very reasonable thing to say. And like I said, people hopped in my mentions mad, talking to somebody's like, oh, you're defending the violence of black men enacted against black women. I was like, bitch, where? Where am I defending the violence enacted against black women because I'm saying let's not use white supremacist rhetoric? Why are you so attached to this language? Why do you want to continuously mimic the words and actions of your motherfucking oppressor, my nigga? So somebody asked me, one of the two people, one person asked me, what do you mean? Because I said it's that I feel like it's white supremacist rhetoric. Somebody asked me, what do I mean? I said, I see people literally using the same exact arguments and numbers and stats that are used to justify black on black crime to pathologize black men. And someone else asked me, how would you go about, and I will put her at name, at Shanty D, how would you go about addressing black men's male privilege plus how it affects us, black women, and black queers? Which was a great question, which was an awesome question if you wanted to really get to the root of what I was saying because you didn't understand. Rather than just fucking beat me over the head with your fucking ideas and your point and, oh, you're wrong and blah, 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 fucking psycho bitch, da, 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 da. She said, how would you go about addressing black men, male privilege, plus how it affects us, black women, black queers? So some language that I used, that I said to her, we live in a white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative society that especially targets black men with ideas of toxic masculinity. Let's discuss dismantling these oppressive systems and decolonizing our collective mindsets from this trap. Don't be misogynistic, bro. Let's discuss how this affects the safety and well-being of black women and or black queer individuals. Let's move away from the normalization of pedophilia and rape culture, i.e. fast or fast-tailed girls. Let's recognize that these oppressive structures, like so many, are a direct result of slavery, post-traumatic slave syndrome, toxic masculinity. I was like, let's talk about the why. Let's get to the root of these issues so we can begin to dismantle these structures. Let's not just mimic white supremacist rhetoric that positions, black men as an enemy that can't be fixed because they're just pathologically violent, just like how white people say the same thing about us, And people didn't like that. People really didn't like that. They didn't like that. So then she asked me, like, oh, where's this from? It actually sounds like something I want to read. I said, I'm making it up. I was like, I'm making it up right now. I was like, I'm just saying it can be done, but a lot of people are really oppressed to this white supremacist language. And then I said, real question, what is wrong with saying don't use white supremacist rhetoric? Since it got you so angry, I was like, who can answer? No one has been able to answer. The vast majority of responses have just been anger and gendered ableist slurs. Some people, and then someone wrote me, some people believe that trauma is greater than everything and you're supposed to make space for toxic behavior. And I wanted to address that too because somebody jumped in my mentions like, well, any way that people want to express their trauma is appropriate. Like, well, if people want to use white supremacist rhetoric, then let them because trauma or something like that. And I was like, white supremacist rhetoric is not excusable by trauma. Like, I'm sorry. If we just disagree on that, we just disagree on that. That's fine. But that's like the fucking Miss Teen USA bitch that got caught fucking using the N-word on fucking Twitter. Like, her excuse was like, oh, I was going through a hard time in my life and blah, 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 blah. Like, she was fucking going through some trauma. Are we going to excuse her white supremacist rhetoric? No. And you don't have to use that type of language. You don't have to use that type of language. It's a conscious fucking choice that you're making. If you're making it out of trauma, if you're making it out of hurt, if you're making it out of personal pain, if you're making it out of, individual experiences. Someone tweeted me like, oh, well, I can't help but see black men as my enemy because I was raped by one. I totally understand that is your individual experience completely, 100%. I 100% understand that is your individual experience. but I still don't think that it excuses white supremacist rhetoric. I don't think that white supremacist rhetoric is ever excusable, because the more we don't challenge these ideas and these concepts in our own minds, and the way that we think, and the way that we speak, and the way that we speak to each other, and the way that we interact with one another, the more the cycles just keep on going and keep on perpetuating. And then you have people that literally are like, all black men are fucking pathological, dangerous, violent animals. Like, I tweeted, like, since we're talking about individual experiences, I was like, my individual experience is that I have never, ever, 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 ever felt unsafe around a black man. Never, ever. I have always felt safe around black men. Friends, family members, I've never felt unsafe. That is my individual experience. That's my fucking truth. Some girl retweeted it. Some girl with thousands of followers retweeted it, talking about, this is a reach, like, you're forcing it, like, I don't believe you. So my positive experience with black men gets discounted, but your trauma makes it okay for you to regurgitate white supremacist rhetoric. And that's literally all I'm talking about, is white supremacist rhetoric. I am not talking about the people that actually fucking do work to dismantle fucking toxic masculinity in the black community, to actually dismantle these motherfucking heteronormative patriarchal systems in our fucking society. No, I'm talking about the people that specifically regurgitate white supremacist rhetoric, and especially statistics on crime amongst black people as a way to pathologize black men. I think it's fucking ugly. I think it's ugly. I think it's real ugly. And I think it's also very ugly and very telling that when you say, can we not use this type of language, people jump on you and attack you and call you a hotep and call you a rape apologist and get very angry, because that white supremacist shit is rooted deep inside of you and you don't want to let it go. And you also have oppressed, marginalized groups that feel like their trauma is more important than anything else, and they're not actually trying to dismantle any systems. They are just trying to they're just trying to feel better. Like how they always say, hurt people. They're just trying to feel better. And they're just trying to move up a little bit in their motherfucking food chain because they don't want to be at the bottom anymore. That's all they're trying to do. That's not what I'm trying to do. That's not what I'm trying to do. That's not what I'm trying to do on this channel. That's not what I'm trying to do with my life. Like, I'm not trying to fucking bully people, because fucking bullying amongst fucking queer individuals on Twitter, and especially queer black men, is a huge fucking issue that we cannot talk about. We mysteriously can't talk about because they're supposed to be on our side. But bullying is a huge fucking issue. I'm not here to bully anybody. Like, I'm not here to fucking call anybody names. You know, you have people that fucking, they screen cap, but they don't at you. But they sit on their timelines and they motherfucking talk shit about you, and then they fucking send their followers to your mentions to talk shit about you. That's fucking bullying. And you're not going to do that shit and then say, well, I'm not bullying because I'm an oppressed person. I'm a marginalized group. You can't say that I'm fucking bullying. Oh, that's misogynistic. Oh, that's homophobic. Oh, you can't disagree with me because you disagreeing with me is fucking homophobic. What? People are allowed to disagree with you, bro. People, and I'm when I say that, I'm really not even talking about anyone in particular. I just mean in general, from a lot of the fucking behavior that I see, you know, from a lot of oppressed, marginalized groups. You know, they find their identity and they find a group online and they click up like a pack and they start attacking people. You know, and they're mimicking their oppressor's behavior, and you can't even point it out. Hey, you're mimicking your oppressor's behavior. Hey, you're using white supremacist rhetoric. Maybe we should try and do a little bit better and be a little bit better about it without them fucking attacking you. And if you don't like it, you can really fucking unsubscribe from my channel. You can unfollow me on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. You can unfollow me in life, bitch. I really don't give a fuck. But also know this. Know this. You're not gonna fucking talk crazy to me on the internet like as if I'm not a real fucking person. Because I also have people running up in my mentions and then fucking running scared when I motherfucking reply to them. Somebody was like, oh, you need to fucking keep the word queer out your straight mouth, bitch. Out your cishet mouth. I was like, first of all, bitch. First of all, since you want to fucking start to throw in the fucking words around. First of all, I'm bisexual. I'm openly bisexual. Everybody knows that I'm fucking bisexual, bitch. Like, I have a very fucking radical queer identity. Like, thanks. Like, yes, I fucking did marry a straight black man, but I am still bisexual. Are we going to talk about the motherfucking bullying of bisexuals that goes on in the fucking queer community? Are we going to talk about bi erasure? No? Can't talk about that? Okay. Alrighty. And when I said that, she ran up on my mentions real quick and blocked me. throw stones and hide their hands, can't even have a conversation about why are we using white supremacist fucking rhetoric and the way that we fucking address one another when we don't have to. We can talk about fucking toxic masculinity without saying, hey, look, studies show that fucking black men mostly attack black women. Studies also show that white men mostly attack white women in terms of domestic violence. Like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that to have these conversations. And that was literally my whole entire point, was that, number one, you don't have to do that to have these conversations. It's ugly and you're mimicking your oppressor. And number two, just because you're a marginalized person does not mean that your privilege all of a sudden, that your privilege in other ways all of a sudden goes away. And it's fucking very willfully ignorant and intellectually disingenuous to pretend that it does, because all my identities make up one person. So you can't say that one aspect of my identity gives me privilege. Shut the fuck up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. And also let go of this white supremacist rhetoric, or examine why you're so attached to it. Is it because of trauma? Is it just because of individual trauma? Are you letting your individual trauma dictate the way that you interact with people? And that's fine. I mean, I don't want to say that it's fine, but it's understandable. But maybe address it. Maybe get some help. So dead ass serious. I said that to somebody on the timeline, and she said I was mocking her. I was like, yo, I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious. I was like, because I think this is the crux of the issue with a lot of people. They confuse their individual experience. Number one, people confuse their individual experiences with systemic privilege. Like, you confuse getting called mayonnaise with not having white privilege. You confuse, getting called a slur because of your sexual orientation with not having male privilege. Number one, people get their individual experiences mixed up with systemic privilege. Is systemic for a reason. It exists outside of your individual experiences. And maybe address the fact that your individual experiences are clouding your judgment, which is understandable. But maybe get some help. Because there are some of us that don't have that. And y'all don't believe us. So I'm going to leave the question with you guys, just like I left the question on Twitter. What is wrong with saying, can we please not use white supremacist rhetoric in speaking about violence enacted against black women as well as black queer individuals by black men? Instead of regurgitating white supremacist rhetoric, let's talk about the real issues and work towards dismantling real heteronormative fucking ideals, real patriarchal ideals, real toxic motherfucking masculinity, real rape culture, the real normalization of pedophilia in our communities. Let's talk about this shit and where it comes from and what it means, instead of using fucking, bullshit ass fucking stats in the same exact way that white people use it against us. And if that makes me whatever y'all want to think it makes me, I'm okay with that. I'm highly logical, bitch, so I know how I fucking feel about it. So one more thing I wanted to read was the same girl at Shanti D. First of all, she said, I'm praying for your mentions. But even before that, she said, using intraracial crime stats isn't the best stepping stone for speaking about black men victimizing black women and black queers, which is a necessary convo. Intraracial crime stats don't show anything unique because that's common in every community. Using that for this convo isn't useful, honestly. And I said that's literally all I'm saying. That is literally all I'm saying. And if you have an issue with that, you should really ask yourself why. It's also really intense to me that critiquing the language used somehow translates to people into excusing violence. Like, I'm not excusing any type of violence. I'm critiquing the language used to talk about violence. When I talk about how fucking black on black crime is not a thing, I'm not excusing fucking violence in Chicago, since you guys always want to talk about Chicago. I'm critiquing the language that's used. And it's very funny, and I feel like I've said this before in other videos, it's very funny how people love it when you're talking about white people, when you're talking about whiteness, but once you start talking about them, once you start talking about their marginalized group, oh, it's not okay anymore. Oh, no, now all of a sudden they're above critique, they're above reproach. No one is above critique. No one is above critique. And just because I'm critiquing you, just because I'm critiquing the language that you're using, doesn't mean that I'm excusing what you're talking about. I'm talking about the language that's being used and how it's harmful language. And I think that that's appropriate. You know, let's talk about the root causes of toxic masculinity and patriarchy and heteronormative black culture. And let's talk about that without using white supremacist rhetoric and certain white supremacist buzzwords. You know, let's talk about conditioning. Let's talk about the root of the issues. All of a sudden it's, oh, you're trying to excuse violence. You're trying to excuse black men. So trying to get to the root of an issue in order to prevent it and stop those cycles from, you know, perpetuating is excusing it? Or do you just not want to talk about those things because then you have to face your own white supremacist rhetoric and you have to face your own fucking issues that you have, and you don't want to do that? It's just always easier to not examine your own issues and to not examine the root causes of problems and to not have to work hard to fucking dismantle it. It's very, very easy to just throw your hands up in the air and regurgitate white supremacist rhetoric and not have to actually do the work. And I see a lot of that going on. Before I go, I want to read you guys this last thread that I was tweeted by one of my followers. It's kind of long, but fuck it, this whole video is fucking long. I had a lot to say about this shit, so let me read it to you guys. From the moment I'm born, I'm told that being gay is wrong in church, by parents, teachers, friends, men, women, boys, girls, everyone. That it is a sin against God, that it's against nature, etc., etc. I am sure you are all familiar with this indoctrination. This philosophy is reinforced in social interaction. Gay is an insult used by guys if you aren't masculine, by girls if you're lame. Gays are reinforced as nasty, weird, strange, abominations, etc., dehumanized to the point where violence against them is okay. This thinking is the popular opinion. If you think otherwise, the Bible will be used to make you into a renegade. Fast forward a couple years, these boys and girls grow up, and this backward, hateful mindset germinates, grows, and matures. And you have men who think of gay people as disgusting human beings, or even less than that, and feel no remorse in abusing them in any way, because they are against nature, and women who also share similar sentiments. These men with debased views of gay people use their power in the patriarchy to be the primary but not sole abuser of the gay community. The people in the gay community who experience abuse, mainly from these men, develop animosity and feelings of betrayal towards these men. And I wouldn't say just the gay community. I would say that the black women community feels similar. Oftentimes their own family members, colleagues, churchmates, neighbors, and friends. Now, this feeling of betrayal, fear, and animosity is warranted because of their experiences, 100%. However, it is dangerous to pathologically implicate these black men for their actions without also focusing on the system that steered them to it. This is not making excuses for their actions. It is understanding their actions in order to try to prevent it from continuing. That is the white supremacist rhetoric. That is what white supremacist rhetoric does. It pathologically implicates black people for their actions, disregarding the systemic factors that contribute to it. And that is what some black women and black people do, queer black people do, unknowingly or knowingly, while trying to address rape and misogyny in the black community. And that is the point. And that is the point. And if you feel like, if you are so attached to your white supremacist rhetoric that you feel like talking about that makes you angry or makes you feel like someone is trying to excuse violence, or makes you feel like someone is coming at you wrong, or is a rape apologist, or is a hotep to the point where you can't even have a conversation about it, you need to fucking really examine yourself. Hard body. Seriously. Now I'm going to read part of that again. Now this feeling of betrayal, fear, animosity is warranted because of their experiences. However, it is dangerous to pathologically implicate these black men for their actions without also focusing on the system that steers them to it. This is not making excuses for their actions. It is understanding their actions in order to try to prevent it from continuing. And that is the motherfucking tea. Pointing fingers at black men as pathological and using white supremacist rhetoric against them does literally nothing to dismantle toxic patriarchy in the black community. Literally nothing, because you aren't even talking about the why. I talk all the time about the why and how the why is really, really important. Otherwise, we end up going around and around and around and around in these circles about, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And another hashtag and another hashtag. You know, we need to talk about the why. And a black man actually asked me about tone policing, you know, and where is the line between tone policing and utilizing white supremacist rhetoric. And I said, I'm not talking about tone policing. I'm not trying to police anyone's tone. Be angry, be furious, take whatever tone you want, but saying literally, statutory violence against black women is mostly at the hands of black men, which was actual literal dialogue that I saw in fucking nasty ass fucking think pieces. That is literally white supremacist rhetoric. It's not just angry. It's not just tone. It's literal white supremacist internalized anti-blackness, internalized anti-black rhetoric hiding behind the guise of activism. And I also saw people that were like, well, the statistics are true though. That's what the statistics say. And it's like, okay, but yes, those same exactly same statistics say that 90% of the violence enacted in the black community is, you know, black people killing other black people. So why is it not okay when that is used against us to talk about black on black crime, but it's okay for you to fucking pull that shit when you're talking about violence between black men and black women? What's the difference? Who can explain to me what the difference is? Like, I literally read a piece that said, like, well, statistics show that black women are, you know, when they're attacked by black men, 90%, there's a 90% chance that statistics show that when black women are, you know, attacked and, you know, sexually assaulted and killed, there's a 90% chance that it's going to be a black man. And intraracial crime proves that. So if that's the stance that we're going to take, then that means that we believe in black on black crime. That means that we believe in black on black crime. And you guys know that I go hard against the black on black crime shit. And that is why I find this type of thinking and wording to also be so offensive, because y'all know I'm a motherfucking stat queen. And there are actually statistics that you can use if you want to use statistics that are not based on white supremacist rhetoric. We could talk about how black women and Native women are the number one women, I believe it's Native women first and then black women second, are the women out of all races that are most likely to be victims of some type of assault or sexual assault by men of all races. Let's talk about that if you guys want to talk about assault, you know? Let's talk about that. That's something very, very serious. JOYCE, I believe her last name was QUAWEAY, I hope I'm saying that right. JOYCE QUAWEAY was beaten to death, right, by two black men, her boyfriend and his friend, who beat her to death for refusing to submit. Now, that is a horrible story where two black men actually did kill a black woman. As far as we know, a black man did not kill Korryn Gaines. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about submission. Let's talk about this idea that black women don't want to submit. Let's talk about toxic masculinity. Let's talk about patriarchy. Let's fucking talk about gender roles even, and the way that the queer community that loves to harp on cishet black men isn't exempt themselves from pushing ideas about doms and femmes and relationships that also often lead to domestic violence, because a lot of the queer community also falls under these same patriarchal ideas about strength and toxic masculinity and patriarchy. Let's talk about heteronormative gender roles and rage. Let's really dig deep. Let's deconstruct oppressive patriarchal systems within the black community so that we can stop propagating and perpetuating them. Don't be fucking misogynistic, bro. Let's talk about it. Those are the conversations that we need to have. Those are the conversations that lead to change, but those are the conversations that are hard to have, because not only can you have the conversations and talk about the why, but you also have to start backing up those conversations with actions in ways, actionable ways that we interact with our own genders and gender ideals and gender identities, and the way that we interact with each other, including the way that cishet black men interact with queer people interact with black women, the way that queer black men that still have male privilege interact with black women, the way that we force these gender norms into a lot of our queer relationships. All this shit falls under the same umbrella of patriarchy and toxic masculinity, and that is the conversation that we need to have. And those are the conversations that I don't see fucking happening. I just see, I hate black men. I hate black men. And listen up, I say this all the time, but this is not a black male bashing channel. I'm not with that shit. And if you hate black men, unsubscribe from my channel. Unsubscribe from my channel. Unfollow me on Twitter. Block me on Twitter. Unfollow me on Tumblr. Unfollow me on Snapchat. Unfollow me on Instagram. Don't fucking follow me. I don't want to talk to you. I don't have any hate in my heart for black men of any sexual orientation, of any fucking, like, I don't have hate in my heart for black men, queer black men, straight black men, cishet. I don't have hate in my heart for black men. I feel like we are them and they are us, and we have to fucking get free fucking together. And I think it's very funny how you can say, well, you can't be pro-black if you're anti-black women, but it's a whole lot of people out there pretending to be pro-black that are anti-black man, and I'm just not with the shits. I'm not with the motherfucking shits. I'm not with the shits. The only people that I'm fucking united against are white people, because they have the motherfucking big privilege, okay? The white privilege. They can oppress me in a very particular way because of race, in a way that no black man, period, can oppress me. So please stop saying that black men are oppressing you in the same way as white people, because they're not. They don't have white privilege. They can never oppress you in the same way as white people, because they don't have white privilege. They do not have systemic race privilege. They can oppress you in terms of gender, yes. Straight people can oppress queer people in terms of sexual orientation, yes. They cannot oppress you in terms of race. Stop it. Stop it. Stop. Stop. Check yourself. And know that's how I feel about it. So if you feel some type of way about it, get the fuck out. Don't let the knob hit your booty when the door closed, because you're in the wrong motherfucking place. Seriously. Peace.